Hey, sorry guys. I had a minor blip there, but we're good to go. Thank you for joining me. My name is Dennis Brown, and today we're going to be doing another Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. But today we're going to talk about a highly debated and very volatile topic, which is, are freight brokers stealing from truck drivers and carriers? Are freight broker margins too much? How much profit margins do freight brokers actually make? There's a huge debate. Whether you go on LinkedIn or you go on Facebook or you go on YouTube, wherever you go, TikTok, there's always a big debate about freight broker margins. You know, trucking companies and drivers think that freight brokers make 50% or more on every load and that they're stealing from drivers. And today I'm going to give you the facts versus the fiction on that exact topic. Okay. I've done an extensive amount of research. I've got the receipts to prove it. I'll show you hands-on exactly how much profit freight brokers make. Okay. So we're gonna just get rid of this debate once and for all. And today's the day we're gonna go into all the details. Okay. So I got a lot of notes that we're gonna be going into today. So here's the agenda. We're going to hit me up in the comments with a city and state you're logging in from. We'll do some shout outs, number one. Then we'll jump into the topic, the training, the topic of, freight broker margins. And then at the end, we'll do live Q&A. Okay. So if you stick around to the end, you can ask me any questions about today's topic or anything related to starting or growing a highly profitable freight brokerage. Okay. So that's where we're at. So here we go. Without further ado, Carlos from North Carolina, welcome. TMP Hustle from San Antonio, welcome. Ricky from California, awesome. Renee from Rochester, Brian from Independence, Oregon, Anthony from Temple, Texas, Trucker 1111 from Detroit, Michigan, Seamus from Miami, Florida, Ricky Burns from North Carolina, Arthur from LA, Corey Bucking from Billings, Montana. We got people from all over the place. I'm excited to talk about this today because, it's a very controversial topic. It's a very heated debate. If you go over on TikTok or you go on LinkedIn or you go on Facebook or even on YouTube, there's a lot of arguing and debating and pontificating, because most of the people in there aren't talking about facts. They're talking about feelings, not facts. And so today I'm going to do a fact versus fiction, a fact versus feeling breakdown of that. Okay. So that's what I'm actually going to show you today. Here are my notes. So you can see there's quite a bit of notes here. Welcome Scott from Plymouth Meeting, PA. Welcome Chip from Maine. Welcome Robert from Bellport, New York. Awesome. So thank you guys for joining me. Here's going to be the agenda. We're going to do the live. We're going to do the shout outs. Then we're going to do the training. And then we're going to do live Q&A. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to give it one more minute. I had to jump on a couple minutes late. I apologize for that, just because we had a little bit of a technical issue, but that's all resolved now. I think you guys should be able to hear me, see me, and follow me here, whether that be on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. So I'm going to grab a quick drink, and then we're going to get the show on the road. Who else we got? Julio from Argentina. Love it. Perfect. Julio Perez. Awesome. Okay, guys. So as you can see, I got a bunch of notes. And part of this is going to be, I'm going to start and then we're going to go in and I'm actually going to do a screen share where I'm actually going to show you guys the actual data. So give me 1 second and see. Let me just make sure that I can do this properly. Give me 1 second. Okay, there you go. Perfect. All right, perfect. Cool. All right. So without further ado, are freight brokers stealing from truck drivers and carriers? How much profit is too much? That's a question, a debate that no matter what social media platform you're on, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, there's always a huge debate. All right. Today's video, I'm going to settle that heated debate because I'm going to present you with the facts about how much profit freight brokers actually make. How much is too much, right? Is it unethical? Is it illegal? Is it unfair? We're going to talk about that, all right? So as someone who's been involved in the freight brokerage industry for over 20 years, okay, I've seen a lot of brokers and a lot of carriers come and go. As a broker, my company, we did over $200 million during my career as a brokerage. And of course, I sold that brokerage several years ago. But I do also have my Freight Broker Bootcamp online training program, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online training program. If you guys are looking for freight broker training or freight agent training, you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. But back to the point. The point is the two things I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you the real data showing profit based upon over $77 billion worth of freight spend. Okay? So that's shippers that have spent over $77 billion annually. And I'm going to show you the freight broker profit margins based upon that. All right. I've got the data and you guys are going to be able to see it. All right. So number one, we're going to start with the two big things I'm going to cover today is how are prices determined, right? How are prices determined in the freight and trucking industry? And then the second part, after that, I'm going to show you the actual data on freight broker profit margin. So number one, we're going to start with how is pricing determined? How are freight rates determined in the trucking and logistics industry? It's very simple. I'm going to explain it to you. And I've said it a million times, but for whatever reason, people either don't listen or they don't want to hear it. Freight rates are determined by supply and demand. Now, more specifically, it is the number of available trucks in comparison and relative to the number of available loads in or out of any market. Let me draw you a picture so you understand what I mean. If you were to try to move a van full truckload from Massachusetts to Illinois, right? So from like Boston to Chicago, Mass to Illinois, right? If you were to try to do that, I looked up on DAT and they show you the broker to carrier average pay. And the average pay for that lane is approximately $1.39 a mile. Okay. Now, $1.39 a mile. Remember that. All right. Very important that you remember that. So that's Mass to Illinois van load, $1.39 a mile. All right. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think about what would it cost to run that exact same load from Illinois to Massachusetts? Same miles, same product, same weight, same driver, same truck, same fuel price, same everything. Well, in your mind, you might think, well, it'd be $1.39 a mile. But in reality, because of the availability of trucks to loads, right? The rate for that is actually $2.86 per mile. So that's more than double the rate to go from Illinois to Mass versus Mass to Illinois. Now, why is that? Well, it's where I started at, and that is supply and demand. There are more loads available in relation to trucks that want to go from Illinois to Mass versus the number of loads to trucks that want to go from Mass to Illinois. Don't get confused, but the reality is it's supply and demand, the number of trucks in relation to the number of loads based on that demand. That is what determines the spot market rates. And that's where most brokers live. Okay, so that's what you got to understand. Now, if you were to look at, for example, other types of equipment besides vans like reefers or flatbeds, or step decks or Conestoga trailers or whatever type of equipment that you want or need or your niche is, okay, you're going to find a different spot market rate from Mass to Illinois and from Illinois to Mass. It's different because the number of available pieces of equipment that are specific to that niche or that type of equipment, the demand versus the number of trucks is going to be different. So the spot market is going to be different. All right. So that's what I want you to understand. And, there's lots of things that affect supply and demand. For example, fuel price, economic conditions, and even weather. Those are all things that have an impact on supply and demand. So what I want you to understand, just because a carrier wants $3 a mile to go from Mass to Illinois, and a shipper wants to only pay $1 a mile to go from Mass to Illinois, the fact is none of that matters. It doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't even matter what your truck costs, or it doesn't even matter what your manufacturing costs are or what you're selling it for. What matters is supply and demand. Now, I'm beating a dead horse with this because I want you to understand that brokers, shippers, and carriers are all at the behest of supply and demand. We're all held and constrained by the laws of supply and demand and by the free market that's going on. That's what the supply and demand does. It allows the free market to operate. It allows the free market to make adjustments up or down based upon those market conditions, which is the way it's supposed to be. Okay? So understand something, all right? There are times when market conditions change rapidly and allow a broker to earn more than the typical 10 to 20% on a full truckload. But there are also times when market conditions change rapidly that brokers will lose 500 or 1,000 or more on an individual load just in order to fulfill that order and to retain that customer. So you got to understand, there are a lot of dynamics that go into this. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to understand supply and demand, you need to understand and you need to spend time on the load boards. You need to spend time understanding the dynamics of in and out of any market, equipment types, and all the economic conditions that are going on there. Now, tools like the DAT and TruckStop make it very easy because they've got these rating tools and they aggregate all that data and they can provide you some baseline information on what those costs are, which saves you a lot of time. Now, if you're a truck driver, you should be subscribing and using that data to understand what the spot market is, the same way as you are if you were a broker. Okay, so that's number one. We talked about supply and demand is what determines rates. All right, number two, let's talk about, and let me show you the data. Hold on one second. I'm going to show you something really quick. I'm going to actually show you the actual data for the top 100 freight brokers for 2024. And I think you're going to be shocked. Hold on one second. Just I forgot to do one thing. I'm going to black this out and then we're going to show you. Okay, cool. So share the screen. Here we are. So you should be seeing the screen you should be seeing in front of you should show you the top 100 freight brokers for 2024. You can see here at the top is C.H. Robinson with $12.4 billion in revenue. You can see scrolling down some of the names that you might be familiar with, like Coyote Logistics and Landstar and, and Allen Lund and Armstrong and Trinity and all these different companies. Matter of fact, even my old company that I sold is on here with $485 million for 2024. Okay, so what I want you to understand is these are based upon data that's been aggregated by TT News. So this is submitted data. Much of this is audited data. Some of these are publicly traded companies. So you can see here is the gross revenue for each of these brokerages, okay? And this is a total of $77 billion, almost $78 billion in freight spend. So this is the gross revenue, and this is what they call net revenue. Now, net revenue is gross revenue minus the cost that they pay to truck, okay? So it's truly net revenue. So it's before other expenses. So for example, if you were a shipper were to pay you $1,000, that's gross revenue, and you were to pay a truck $800, the net revenue would be $200. Okay, so that's the example that I want to share with you. This is gross revenue. This is net revenue. This is actually gross profit. Okay, this is what gross profit is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the gross profit percentage for each of these brokerages and the average amongst the entire $77 billion in freight spend. And I think you're going to be shocked, okay? Because I was a bit shocked. I'll be honest with you, because I wasn't sure how the math was going to come out with these larger brokerages. I didn't know if it was going to be higher or lower, but the fact is it fell right into where I thought it was going to. So for example, If I remove the blacked out portion, you can see here, C.H. Robinson, a publicly traded company where you can go in and look at their financial statements. Their average gross profit margin is 12.78%. Now, that doesn't shock me. They're a large volume broker, right? And so that doesn't shock me at all. There may be times when they're a little higher, there may be times when they're a little lower, but ultimately you can see the profit margins for all these different companies. They range from 12 to 21 to 15 to 10 to 11 to 13 to 20 to 17 to 14, all the way down. And then when you got one at 9.3 or 8, 9.9, you got one at 12. And then when you get down to the bottom here, you're going to see that it's 14.99%. Now, I've been saying this for years. Brokers on average are typically earning between 10 and 20% gross profit, and with an average of probably somewhere in the range of 14 to maybe 17%. This is 14.99%. This is math. I didn't make up these numbers. These are the numbers that have been submitted from audited financials from these companies that all have these audited financials because they're large companies based on over $77 billion in freight spend. Okay. So what you got to understand is this is based on a very large freight spend. So it's a much more reliable statistic than any one individual anomaly that you may see. Now, like I told you before, the fact is you may have loads where brokers might make 30 or 40%, but you're also going to have loads where brokers lose $200 or $500 or $1,000 on a load because they have to fulfill that order and retain that customer. Okay. So what I want you to understand is this: the debate should be over as it relates to what the average profit margins are for brokers, because here is over $77 billion worth of data. And here is what the data says: 14.99% profit margins. Okay. So I'm going to close this out really quick. And the reason why I wanted to do this today is because, guys, listen, everybody needs to make money. Freight brokers need to make money. Carriers need to make money. Shippers need to make money. But the bottom line is this: freight brokers, shippers, and carriers don't determine freight rates. Supply and demand, the market determines freight rates, and brokers are simply placed in the middle as an intermediary to interpret that data and to try to connect the two dots. So I understand that I've never been a truck driver, but I can understand, I know a lot of truck drivers, that it can be very frustrating when you're running a load from Mass to Illinois for $1.39 a mile and you're losing money. But I also understand on the other side of the coin that if you're getting paid $2.89 a mile to go from Illinois to Mass, you're obviously making money. So, I want to share this data because I think it's important that we have some transparency and some real data-driven information that people can base their judgments on. Now, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I just wanted to present the facts to brokers and agents so that they understand what is realistic. And I wanted to present it to carriers and drivers so that they understood that not every broker is out there to get them. And the reality is, just like there are bad shippers and there are bad carriers, there are bad brokers. So you need to base your decisions based upon the quality of that broker and the relationship you have with them, okay? Not based upon, anecdotal evidence of one time where you thought a broker was making a lot more money on a load. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Listen, if you enjoyed this, if you got any value out of this, hit the like button, repost or share the stream. I truly appreciate it. If you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students, had that program for almost 15 years now. And we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money back guarantee. Okay, cool. So guys, we're going to jump into Q&A, but hold your questions. Before we jump into that, share with me your thoughts about the data that I just shared with you as it relates to profit margins. Hit me up in the comments and share with me your thoughts about freight broker profit margins. Let's talk a little bit about that in the comments. Go ahead. And then in a minute, we'll jump into Q&A. Jane, watching from the Philippines. Welcome, Jane. Amori, what's the topic? The topic today is freight broker profits. Are freight brokers stealing from drivers and carriers? What are the actual and real freight broker profits? Okay. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you so much. Yeah, Brandon, you're right. CH typically has lower profit margins, right? That's because they try to bid lower, but they also sometimes squeeze the rate on the carrier side too, right? So you got to understand $50 per load difference up or down could have a pretty big delta, could have a pretty big impact on their gross profit margins. So they run very tight because they are a high volume brokerage. You see, they did over $12 billion in revenue. Okay. Okay, good, Renee. Thank you. Bob, good. Yes, it is. You're right. The numbers are the numbers, guys. You know, I'm not saying that there aren't smaller brokers or agents out there that are making higher profit, but I also know that there are smaller brokers that are making lesser profits, right? But this is based on $77 billion worth of freight spend. All right. So it's good data, meaning it's tested on a large data sample. It's not based on an individual week or month or load. It's based upon a huge data sample, which helps the integrity of the data to show that, that those are more realistic numbers, which is under 15%. Even if it was 15%, 14.99% is what the data showed. So. Yeah, Arthur, I don't know what the double broker data would be, but it would be minuscule in comparison. That's why the data set needs to be so big. $77 billion in revenue. That's where that data set, having a large data set, has a big impact, right? So hope that helps. All right, listen, hit me up with some questions. Hit me up with some questions. We're going to do live Q&A for a little bit. But today is my birthday, so I'm going to cut out a little bit early, but I do have some calls this afternoon that I have to do. And then unfortunately I've got some personal matters that I got to take care of a little bit later. So I'm probably going to have to cut out a little bit early. Hit me up in the comments with any questions you guys have, whether that be about today's live or whether that be about freight broker startup or freight broker marketing or freight broker sales or rating or whatever it is, right? Hit me up with some questions. Be specific on your questions and I'll absolutely try to hone in on those. Okay. Question TMP Hustle. What's the best advice when you have a customer who has partial loads and DAT and truck stop is only giving full truck pricing? It's difficult to maintain a decent margin and drivers take it. Okay. So I have a video training that I did. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on a minute. Let me see if I can find it. If I can, I'll share it with you. Hold on one second. Because I want to help you because I have let's see. Okay, here you go. Got it. I found it. Cool. All right. I'm going to put it I'm going to share it in the comments. Okay. FTL, PTL, LTL, rating. Okay. I just added it to the comments. You should have it. Okay. That's a YouTube video that I did. And I talk about partial rating, partial truckload and how to do it. Okay. So I hope that helps. Amor asks, how long does it take to typically finish your beginner's freight broker program? Freight broker bootcamp, typically most students complete the program in 1 to 2 weeks over the course of 4 to 8 hours. Okay. Everybody learns a little bit different speed. It's self-paced. It's on demand. You have access to it 24/7. You don't have to worry about it conflicting with your work schedule. You can do it in the evenings, morning, after work, before work, whatever you want to do. It's all online. So it's on demand, self-paced. Most people complete the training in somewhere between 4 and 8 hours over a 2 to 4 week period of time based on the data that I've been able to collect. So I hope that helps. Good question. Thank you. Question from Ricky. Do you think these 100 companies take the majority of loads, making it harder for a few upstarting brokers, especially in California with so many new regulations? I think that it represents $77 billion worth of freight spend. And I think at any given point, the number one, that's not 100% of the market. There is a lot more market there. I don't know what the exact total market data. But yeah, the larger companies control a much larger percentage of freight spend, but there are still tens of thousands of brokers out there that are doing, 6 figures, 7 figures, and even 8 figures, right? All of these companies were doing 9 figures plus, but there's a ton of freight spend. Now, you are competing against other brokers in almost any market, okay? But that's just the nature of the beast in any industry. I don't care if you're in the real estate industry or the insurance industry or the SaaS industry or the software industry, or whatever industry, and you're still competing. You're always competing, right? Even if you're a trucking company, you're competing. There's hundreds of thousands of trucking companies out there. You're always competing, but there are trucking companies that are profitable, and there's trucking companies that are successful, and there's trucking companies that aren't profitable, and there are trucking companies that aren't successful, right? So the biggest variable is going to be your ability to differentiate yourself when you're selling your service, developing those relationships, and then understanding and embracing the supply and demand nature of pricing, which obviously I went into in detail. So I hope that helps. Renee, not only am I struggling with sales, but I have been off finding the market a couple times and lost freight. Any suggestions on improving finding the market? Well, finding the spot market is a function of really two things. Number one, using spot market data from the load boards like DAT and TruckStop. Okay, so using their rating tools to give a range of spot market data, and then validating that data by actually talking to carriers. So for example, that example I gave, Boston to Chicago. If I had a load from Boston to Chicago and I'd never moved it before, my first step would be to go to the load boards and the rating tools. And the first thing I would do is I would look at that, and the average rate that I found was $1.39. Now that ranged anywhere from, I think, from $1.15 up to like $1.59, and the average was $1.39. So what I would do is I would take that low, that $1.15, okay, and I would start contacting carriers that have trucks posted in that lane. I would contact carriers based on lane history that have posted that truck in the past in that lane. I would post that load and I'd start taking calls, and I would start having conversations with carriers. And I would start at the low or below. I might start at $1.05 a mile or $1.10 a mile. What I'm trying to do is what you're saying, Renee, is you want to find the market. You want to find the spot market for a truck. So you don't ask a carrier when they call you, you don't ask a carrier how much they want to move from Boston to Chicago, because it doesn't matter what they want. It matters what the spot market is. So if you're trying to identify the spot market, you want to, at that point, you want to start low and then feel the market out. If somebody hangs up on you, a couple of people hang up on you at $1.05 a mile, then you know you're probably too low. So you know you probably need to raise it up to $1.15 or $1.20, right, of what you're going to cost to buy it. And then eventually, after you find 3 or 4 or 5 trucks that are in that range, maybe you've got somewhere between $1.30 and $1.40 a mile is what you're going to have to pay. Now you understand what the cost of a truck's going to be, okay? Spot market today. Now that's not going to change drastically in the next week or 2 weeks unless there's a weather condition or, some sort of, event that has a huge impact on the financial markets. But yeah, now you understand what your cost basis is, and then you can mark that up and add your margin and sell it through. So now That's the other variable. How much margin are you going to put on top? Are you going to try to make 20%? Or are you going to try to make 10% on that first load? That's really up to you. I'm not here to determine that. But what I want you to understand is it's important to get your foot in the door, right? The hardest part of this whole deal with getting a shipper is getting the first load. Once they trust you enough to give you the first load and you move that load successfully, you have just bridged a huge gap in trust. Now, they don't completely trust you, but they trust you enough to probably give you another load or maybe the opportunity on another lane. And so you got to get your foot in the door. The great part is, if you're smart about how you quote these lanes and how you sell your service, the lifetime value of a client, the lifetime shipper of even a small client, you're talking about, one client doing one load a week, one full truckload a week, you're talking about, $50,000 to $100,000 a year for a small shipper. An average shipper might be $200,000 to $500,000 in revenue, and a large shipper can easily be $500,000 to $1 million plus per year. So, and then that's every year. If you can retain that client for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, that's the secret to success as a freight broker, is the LTV, the lifetime value of that shipper. So I don't want to get off on a tangent, Renee, but I hope that answered your question. I'm scrolling. Give me 1 minute. Okay. Seamus, when booking a load, how do I handle carriers that say they need more transparency? I don't know what they mean. They need more transparency. Okay. So there's another debate going on about freight broker rate transparency. Okay. And it's kind of tied to this whole freight broker profit debate, right? Carriers think that brokers are ripping them off. The reality is brokers are making an average of 15%. I just proved it. I just showed the data. So freight broker rate transparency is where a carrier wants to know what the shipper is paying you in relation to what you're paying the carrier. Now, again, there's a big debate going on about that. But the reality is right now you do not have to book a load with a carrier that requires that. Now that may change down the road, but right now, I don't think it is, but right now that's the case. All right. So rate transparency, it would be completely up to you whether you want to tell them what the shipper is paying you. That's completely up to you. I never did, and I never would. It's none of their business. If they negotiate a rate that is a rate that's acceptable to them and they take that, it doesn't matter how much I make. If the rate that I'm offering them isn't acceptable, they have 2 options. They can go to another broker, or they can go get their own direct shippers. Simple. Okay. So that's what they're looking for, Seamus. I think if you have a follow-up question, let me know. Thank you for the happy birthdays. Thank you so much. Carlos, do drivers think we're not supposed to make money as freight brokers on the percentage? No, I think they just are misled by the media and by uninformed and uneducated people that are out there pontificating on social media, saying that all brokers are making 30 or 40, 50%. The reality is, here's what you got to understand. And this is what drivers and carriers have got to understand. Smart carriers and drivers do understand this, but a lot of them do not. If a broker is averaging 15% gross margins, that doesn't take into consideration bond, insurance, software, personnel, right? Salaries and hourly. Doesn't take into consideration, any of that. Doesn't bad debt. It doesn't take into consideration any of those costs. So after 15%, they've got to take all of those expenses out of that 15%. Okay. And then what's left after all those expenses is the profit. That's profit. And then that gets taxed. So while a freight brokerage business can be profitable when it's small, a one-man operation making 6 figures or, multiple 6 figures, Large scaled out operations like a CH Robinson at $12 billion in revenue, they're probably only going to put 3% EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, to the bottom line, right? I mean, those are all that data is publicly available. You can go look at all that CH data. You're going to know they have huge amount of overhead. Now, the bigger they get, the more overhead they have, right? If they got developers and they've got different levels of management. They've got all these things. So, I don't know what they think, but I do think that they believe that brokers are making more than 15% on average, and the data just doesn't show that. Nico asks, what advice would you give an owner-operator trying to get into being a broker? That's a good question, Nico. I think owner-operators and truck drivers in general have a huge advantage when it comes to transitioning to a broker. But let me explain to you why. Number one, they have the experience of driving over the road. They know what it takes to pick up and deliver a load on time in good condition with no problems. Nobody knows better that scenario than a driver, because they're in the seat of the truck, they're on the docks, they see it, they've done it, they've been there. Now, the level of experience you have is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever that is, your knowledge increases, okay? Now, the other part of it that's beneficial is that you have a network of drivers and carriers that you know and you've met, and you have a network of shippers that where you've picked up and delivered to. So you have a network. Now, those three things, the knowledge, experience, network, okay? Those things that I just shared with you, I had none of those when I first started. I had no background in logistics or trucking. I had no network in shipping or trucking. So I started from zero. A lot of my students have started from zero. But some of the students that have been past truck drivers have picked it up very, very quickly. The biggest struggle that most new brokers have, whether they are a freight broker or whether they come from a trucking side or whether they have no experience like me, is usually the sales side. The sales side, how to get shippers. That's usually the biggest struggle, because it's cold calling or cold emailing or cold outreach and trying to develop relationships with shippers if they don't have a network. So that's another big advantage that drivers have. They have a warm market. They've already got all these bills of ladings and relationships they've had over years with shippers. But most people struggle, and that's the reason why I put together the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. That is an 8-week live coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, and I teach you my best freight broker sales strategies, tactics, tools, but most importantly, my entire system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a broker. I teach and coach you on that system, and that's the Freight Broker Sales. Now, if you're curious about that, if you're struggling with getting shippers or you need help, then get on the wait list. But understand something. The Freight Broker Sales Accelerator is not for freight broker startups that need information about how to become a broker or how to become an agent. Go to Freight Broker Bootcamp for that. If you need specific sales coaching and help, then that's where the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator comes in. It's a very different program. Okay. It's a much more advanced program. I have new brokers and new agents that have no customers. And I have in that program, I also have other brokers and agents that have a small customer base, 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 customers that are looking to scale up. So yeah, that's what that program is for. So get on that wait list. It costs you $0 to get on the wait list. Okay. As a matter of fact, there are a couple available spots right now. I opened it up last week. It's pretty much full, but I still have some available spots. So if you guys get on the wait list, you'll get a link where you can check out all the details, and then, we might get an opportunity to work together. So I hope that helps. Let me find where I was at here. Carlos, yes, hazmat is a niche. So you would probably have van hazmat, which is a type of equipment, right? It would probably go on a van, most likely. That's what most hazmat does. And so, yeah, that's a niche that you can pursue. Yes, absolutely. Renee says, should I post a fake load on DAT and get calls? Sure, why not? If you're trying to find the market, and you're trying to quote things properly, yeah, sure. I mean, I would first call the carriers that are available in the lane history, but at the end of that, if I don't have the data that I feel comfortable with to validate that spot market rate, I would absolutely post a load, take some calls, and then pull it down. Sure, why not? Jane asks, is it possible to start a freight brokerage if I'm living in the Philippines? Since you have to mention it can be done remote, I think the FMCSA will allow me with authority needed. Okay, so if you can get a freight broker authority through the FMCSA, okay, if you're able to check all the boxes, meaning the broker bond and the BOC3 and the UCR, the basic stuff that are required to become a freight broker, yes, you can do it remote. There are freight brokers in other countries that have, in Canada and other countries that operate freight brokerages inside of the United States. So I don't think the Philippines is any different. I've never heard any different. But again, you're going to have to meet those requirements. So part of that, the biggest requirement that you're going to have is a bond, right? And so that's usually the biggest challenge, particularly for people out of state or out of country, because the bond is heavily based upon your credit. And so if you're not built into that US credit system where you actually have credit, a lot of countries don't operate like that, then you may struggle. But here's the cool part, Jane, if you can't become a freight broker, start as a freight agent. Here's why. Freight agents do not require a bond. They do not require a license. They do not require a test. They do not require you to pay the carriers. They do not require any big expenses or risk. You can start very low with very little risk, very little expenses, and you can get paid between 50 and 70% of the profit on any given load that you generate and move, right? So if you have a customer that pays you $1,000 and you pay a carrier $800 and there's $200 in gross profit, you would make between $100 and $140 on that one load. Okay? You move one load a day, you can do the math. You move 5 loads a day, you can do the math. But agents work under a licensed freight broker. So you have an FMCSA approved licensed freight broker, and agents run under them as independent contractors, meaning they're not W-2 employees. They're not getting a salary. They're not getting hourly. They're getting commission only. And that's how agents work, whether they're in the US or the Philippines or wherever. So I hope that helps. Good question. Thank you. Yeah, what challenges do natural disasters like the one in California present to the transportation industry, especially to freight brokers? So in general, what happens when you have a natural disaster, whether that's a hurricane or a tornado or a fire or something catastrophic, right, like that, or flood, what happens is that market, right, so let's say LA, right? So when that fire takes place, all of those shipments that are going in or out of that market pretty much get canceled, right? And they have to push them forward days or even weeks, depending upon the catastrophe, depending upon the circumstances, right? The disaster. So what happens is when that starts to free up and they open things back up, the trucks and loads are not in a position to move. So it changes the market dynamics of the rates, because where there might have been this number of trucks in LA on any given day, now because of the fire, there might only be this number of trucks. And because there might have been this number of loads that needed to ship on that given day, because they haven't shipped, now there may be that many loads. So now you have less trucks, more loads. So what happens? Rates go up, right? So that's how, disasters and catastrophic situations like the California wildfires can have an impact on pricing and supply and demand. Okay, so I hope that helps. I'm scrolling. Give me 1 minute. I'm just looking for some questions. Rufus asks, is it better to be a broker carrier or just a broker? I don't think there's better. I think there's just different. I was never a carrier. We had our broker authority. Most of the brokerages out there aren't carriers. Most of the bigger brokers up there aren't carriers. That list that I showed you, Most of them are just non-asset-based brokers. But can you as a carrier have your broker authority? Sure. Can you as a broker have your carrier authority? Sure. Yeah, you can. But remember something, if you're a broker and you're going to go out and get trucks, you got to understand it's a very different business to run trucks than it is to run a brokerage. Just like it's a very different business to run a broker than it is to run trucks. So you got to understand they're very different businesses, right? They have a huge difference in how they need to be run. With carriers, you have a huge, you got a lot of fixed overhead. You got a lot of risk and expense. On the broker side, you need to have a lot of skills in sales and marketing in order to actually get and retain those clients. Whereas carriers don't really have to have that because they rely heavily on load boards. Most carriers, not all carriers, but most carriers rely heavily on load boards. So they don't really need to know how to sell, right? To go out and get customers. So that's just a little bit of feedback. Quez asks, I'm having a hard time finding a job in my area to get the experience. Do you recommend starting by taking your course? Well, I don't know exactly what, are you trying to get a job as a freight broker, a W-2 inside job? Yeah, the more knowledge you have, whether you want to be an agent or you want to be a W-2 employee, the freight broker bootcamp training or some online training or coaching can definitely be beneficial. Because what it's going to show your future employer is that you are educated, and it's going to take less time for them to bring you up to speed, and there's less risk. Okay. So yeah, I think a course like Freight Broker Bootcamp could help you if you're trying to get a job, a W-2 job. I think it absolutely could help you. Now, it's not designed for that. It's designed for people that want to be licensed freight brokers or freight agents. But the knowledge that's in there, it's the same knowledge that an inside broker needs, right? Who does W-2. So I hope that helps. Seamus asks, what's the best strategy to not lose money when getting paid from shippers? Bill them properly, bill them in a timely manner, and make sure you follow up. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Those are the three. The fourth would be if you have a customer with a large credit line, then you may want to consider what's called receivables insurance, where an insurance company will insure those invoices that in the event that the shipper were to go bankrupt or have some sort of issue, that they will pay you minus a small deductible. So you'll be able to recover those invoices. That's called receivables insurance. So those would be the four that I would give you. Bill them properly. Make sure you have all the documentation. Bill them timely. Follow up. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And then if you have large credit lines, then you may want to consider receivables insurance for some or all of your customers. Carlos, the biggest thing you need to look out for as an agent or a broker is double brokering scams. Right? Double brokering scams where people trying to double broker and defraud, or double broker and, try to fit themselves into the middle. So double brokering scams are probably the biggest thing you need to look forward to, or you need to look for. The key there is to make sure you vet the carriers properly. And if you do that, then, there's a 99% chance you're not going to have an issue. Seamus, do I need to use factoring to pay carriers? No, you don't have to. You can pay carriers direct if you have the capital or cash flow to do it. But most freight broker startups don't. And so a lot of them will use factoring. Okay. Now, a factoring company is like specialized financing that will give you like a 90 to a 95% advance on that load. So for example, if you build a shipper $1,000, they'll give you 900 so that you can pay the carrier, okay? And then they'll hold the other money back, and then when the shipper pays them, they'll hold back their fee and they'll give you the difference. So let's say their fee is 3%, that'd be $30. They'll give you the other 70, and there you go. So you got 970, they got 30, that was 1,000 total, right? So that's how factoring works. Sometimes the factoring companies will pay the carriers direct. Sometimes they'll just give you the money and you pay them. It depends on the relationship you have. But Factoring is a powerful tool for startups and for high growth companies, right? Because if a carrier needs to get paid in 15 to 30 days and you're not going to get paid for maybe 30 to 60 days, there's a negative cash flow there. So where's that money going to come from? It either comes from bank financing or money that you set aside or factoring typically. So I hope that helps. All right, guys, listen, that's going to wrap it up for today. We've been here on almost an hour. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Scale of 1 to 10. How did you guys rate today's training? 1, Dennis, this was a complete waste of time. You're a joke. I'll never be back. Or 10, hey, listen, you hit it out of the park. Thank you for sharing the data. Anything in between. If it's anything less than an 8, let me know what I could do better. Let me know what I could do different. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. I hope this topic was of interest to you. I hope it educated you. I hope you guys got value out of the Q&A. Let me know your feedback. I truly appreciate it. Set a reminder on your phone or on your computer or wherever that every Monday at noon, I do a new Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. And again, if you guys want to get on the wait list for the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, again, I have a few spots available right now. If you get on the wait list, you'll get notified where you can get all the details. And again, that program is always sold out. It's an 8-week live coaching program where I work with you to help teach and coach and mentor you through this process of how to get 2 to 4 new shippers per month and on your way to 7 figures in sales. Okay, so I hope that helps. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the feedback. I'm glad that I was able to hit the right topic at the right time. And we'll see you next Monday on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Thanks, guys and gals. Thanks, everybody.